catastrophic. Oh my God, you can't use any of this, Dennis. As far as the body design of JKU, we were just about to move into setting up the pivots on the axle side with the links, and then life happened. So we had to step away from that, move into some other things. As far as the MJ, there was some things we were waiting for to complete the bed section from the company that's supplying those components. That stuff got here. It completed the bed section, but also posed some questions regarding where there were going to be some cross members mounted, as well as how to tackle placing a fuel tank. Hey, come tell me what you're thinking as far as this cross member, because I'll make the rest of that stuff happen. But are you thinking something removable or not removable?
Probably not removable. Let's get this thing bolted up first, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Get your 4 holes done, and then that way we can get it up off the
I was
tracks.
just making sure I got your line of thought there before you took off.
There's a little bit of trickery trying to get that vehicle dialed in because it is a unibody build that's being converted into this bigger motor V8 with kind of overland setup. So we mounted this box in between the existing box and the cab, and so we're marking some holes to line it up, put the hardware in, and then I'll be able to get underneath it and build a cross member for support. It was just a cross member that needed to be placed inside of a confined section of the chassis. So I had to take a tube, create a cross member, cut it, bend it, and then sleeve it essentially from the outside rather than the inside. So we had 2 extra Jeeps from our ambassadors come to the shop for a little bit of work. We had Danielle's JLU come. It's the one that's accented in pink, so it stands out quite a bit in a shop like this. But the plan was to do some tasteful upgrades along with her theme. Basically everything on the inside of the tub was what it was going to be looking like. Kyle and Angel were nice enough to help with stripping out the interior.
You already hurt yourself, Kyle?
Dude, these elastic doohickeys are no joke.
Getting things kind of prepped and set up. This one is a little bit more challenging because it's a nice newer vehicle. So we've been trying to do everything we can to keep it nice. It's not quite as invasive of a build as what's behind me, but we do have to keep it nice and shiny. There were some challenges that were different on this vehicle. So first of all, this is a heavier vehicle, so the tube is bigger. The main tube components on the JLU Motobilt cage are 2-inch, and everything on the JKU is 1.75 inches.
Man, that makes for good TV, huh? Now that the bulk of the cage has been removed, we're moving into the more precise cuts that will integrate the stock body with the Motobilt cage. There was some pretty challenging discrepancies with the instructions on where to cut. We'll still be able to do the
There are some lacing tubes and things like this on the JLU that are still 1.75 inches. However, the mains are 2-inch. So a little bit bigger, a little bit beefier because the vehicle itself is heavier. However, when mounting these tubes and the base plates, kind of getting your foundation done for the cage, it does present some challenges because they're nice 3/16 thickness plates, and then you're mounting them to components on the chassis that are, first of all, covered in paint. Secondly, backed with either foam or some sort of rubber insulator. So anytime you weld to it, it wants to smoke and do nasty stuff on the backside. And then on top of that, it's extremely thin. So I'm gonna say at most 24 gauge. So you're welding 3/16 to 24 gauge, and I'm gonna say that the steel on these JLUs has some alloys or additives in it that don't like to melt the way that traditional steel does.
Totally straightforward.
As per the instructions.
Yep, warranted by Gorbachev himself. Spray. Down in there.
When I was up near the A-pillar and trying to get some of that stuff established, I was striking an arc at 30 amps, trying to get some sort of puddle created on placing those A-pillars, and would immediately blow like dime-sized holes in the 24 gauge material.
Look at that. As soon as I went into it.
It's extremely challenging to work with. It requires low amperage, which is the best way to not blow holes through metal. However, it's not really the best way to get a good penetrated weld either. So it's challenging. It's challenging, but we were able to get it done. The reason why a lot of these companies, in terms of a nice laser cut roll cage system like this one and the one behind me, having a 6 or 7 foot long A to D pillar with a compound bend in it doesn't ship well. So what they do is they design it to be rosette spliced. So whenever you do a rosette splice, like I was describing before, you have 2 tubes of a certain outside diameter and a certain inside diameter. You want to take at least 6-8 inches of inside diameter pipe or tube, be able to slide those in between, and that creates a little bit of a bridging junction. Both sides of the base tube are going to have at least 2 half-inch holes on either sides, and then they're going to span those equally with a little bit of a gap in between the 2 tubes. You can weld around those. You can rosette plug weld both sides of the tube, and then if you choose, grind them smooth. The other thing that they plan on with a cage like this is right where those 2 tubes are spliced together, you have the intersection of the B pillar coming from the bottom. So it creates a nice T with a bunch of enforcement. It's definitely not weaker, not quite as seamless as one solid tube, but it's not going to ship either. So you're kind of at that point placed with, you're going to do your own thing and create it from an entire stick of tube as a fabricator would, or you're going to use a kit like this and just follow their instructions. I've gotten pretty good over time of doing these rosette splices and making them look seamless, especially if it's powder coated. You never see it, but if you looked at it right now, you'd never know that there was 2 tubes that were placed together, but they most definitely are.
Oh, damn.
Is he gonna yell at me right now?
Yeah.
We'll go over there, we'll try and place the driver's side, A to D pillar, and then secure that against the B pillar that's existing.
Okay.
We'll do the same thing for the passenger side, and then see if we can put some of the cross bracing in and ratchet strap it in.
catastrophic. Oh my God, you can't use any of this, Dennis. Yeah, the rest of the kits normally go pretty good. They're not Legos. Everything needs a little bit of clearance. Everything needs a whole lot of prep. You got to get everything laid out and be organized, and all of the things that you can do before installation, like pre-installing bungs, doing your welding and rosette splice, prepping the base plates, especially in a TIG welding application, because you want everything to be free of any sort of scale, even though most of this stuff is either cold rolled or pickled and oiled. We don't want to be in a situation where we go to weld something and the weld is contaminated due to scale and things like that. We also had some challenges with the placement of some of the tubes on the cage, because this particular kit comes with laser etched markings of where the tubes should roughly land. They're not 100% perfect, and every installation is a little bit different because every vehicle from the factory is a little bit different. However, we end up in a situation where I want to, in a TIG welding application, completely clean to bare metal, and we can't always do that. And I don't want to necessarily go placing tubes where they weren't intended on a kit, because this kit is intended to interface with all the stock functions of the vehicle, being hardtop doors, windshield, seat belts, even if you use them, even though we're going to go PRP stuff. Well, I placed both C-pillars at the same angle because I clamped them to this tube. And then when we went to put this one in, it didn't fit. So then I trimmed this one a little bit, and it got to the point that it wasn't going to be able to be at the right height. So I had to break the tacks on the C-pillars to bring it back in. Completely level and just about there. So we have this TIG welder. It's a Lincoln Electric Aspect 230 AC/DC, and it's definitely a good motorsports application TIG welder. And it came with pretty much everything. It came with a cart, it came with an accessory kit, it came with obviously the cooler on the bottom and all the lines, but we also had a TIG hand finger switch, which replaces the foot pedal. We used a TIG finger switch in a 2T configuration, and it turned out to be really convenient for placing tube, tacking tube, and even partial first pass. You got to set your machine up right, because you can't throttle the way you can with a foot pedal with a finger switch. However, you also don't have to worry about necessarily bringing this bulky foot pedal into a vehicle that isn't really comfortable to stand or sit in, and you're trying to make life happen. We've got the cage installed, all the bracketry on the cage installed, all the base plates that the cage sits on installed. Everything's ready and placed where it's not going to move anymore. I do a series on every tube junction once I know that it's in place. I don't just do 1 tack or 2 tacks. Every tube junction gets 4, 5, 6 tacks. I'll weld as much as is convenient in the Jeep. So that could be as much as all the way around on the first pass of welding, and it could be as little as maybe half of the tube junction. But at that point, I know it's really not gonna move. When the cage does come out for final welding, I always put some cross members in there and some X bracing to make sure that things aren't gonna wanna warp or walk on us, but we know they're not gonna fall off for sure. So every tube is placed and secured before it comes out. However, we do need to move into the next step of what we're doing. Before the cage comes out, we need to make sure that the B-pillar chop is complete and functional. And we want to make sure that that lands where it's going to land on the cage. Cage needs to stop as far as progression. We move into the situation where we complete the B-pillar, chop, and functionality, and then the cage can come back out for final welding and things kind of speed up at that point.
Not marshmallows, Angel.
No?
It's not marshmallows.
You sure, Dennis?
I'm positive.
You want to try it?
No, don't be trying it.